They need to decimate any trace of the combat system and replace it with literally anything else. I don't care if they make it a turn-based RPG, the combat of Witcher 1 is shocking. It genuinely boggles the mind that their next game was The Witcher 2, which, while not having the greatest combat of all time or anything, represents a meteoric leap in combat quality, akin from Resident Evil 3 to 4. Problems range from the total lack of dodge mechanics, the absurd stun lock that can take place, and above all, how disengaging the combat is by not requiring the player to move around. The hitboxes are so generous that your positioning isn't all that necessary. Geralt will damage any enemy in a 10-meter radius of him, despite the fact his sword is nowhere near their bodies. The only thing required of a player in a standard non-boss combat encounter is to hit your QTEs when the icon is glowing, essentially creating a rhythm game. Needless to say, there's no weight, no skill, and no strategy behind this system, and it looks clumsy by modern standards. Simply giving the game a more refined version of Witcher 3's combat should be the first step of making the remake. Now, that would require redesigning every single fight in the game, but believe me, it's worth it. However, the best thing they can do for the remake is to show from the first moment that they've completely changed the game in a way that's for the better. See, most remakes want to start off showing their iconic moments in a fully realized glory that floods the player with an intense nostalgia. The problem with doing that for Witcher 1 is that the opening is the worst part of the game. The assault on Kaer Morhen sets a false expectation that this is going to be an action-heavy game fighting generic bad guys, when in reality, Witcher 1 is the most narrative-heavy entry in the trilogy, whose primary gameplay insists of more investigating and walking than anything else, but we'll get to that later. Where Witcher 3 starts off by showing Geralt's bond with Ciri, and then transitioning to an investigation around a griffin, which to be fair also sets an expectation for the majority of that game, Witcher 1 gives off the vibe that combat will be the primary experience, and with how unintuitive the combat can be, it doesn't set a good expectation for the rest of the game. If this section can be cut down massively to about 15 minutes or half an hour, and when combined with the reworked combat system, I think it sets a much better precedent for the quality of the game, as right now it does put its worst foot forward. My personal biggest area for improvement lies in traversal. The amount of walking from A to B across the same environments is infuriating. There is a small means of fast travel, but it's nowhere near as widespread as it needs to be. While simply adding fast travel is the obvious answer, I think there's a way to make traversal much more rewarding, but it does require more effort. Witcher 3 is a game that discourages fast travel by only allowing you to do so at signposts. This is done because the magic of that game comes from randomly stumbling upon a quest or monster that draws you away from your objective and allows you to lose yourself in the world. Witcher 1 has no such feature. The first time you cross the swamp is the same as the 100th. Now, of course, the budget was much smaller, so this would be an impractical solution for such a small studio. That's no longer an issue, so adding extra things to do is a great way to incentivize traversal, but still put in a much more expansive fast travel system. The game really needs it. There is something more controversial that needs to be reworked: the sex card system. Now, I don't think the game needs to censor any nudity in the original, or even make Geralt less of a slut. I just think the game needs to make romance feel more natural, by not collectibilizing anything Geralt can bang. It feels so seedy as it is now. All that needs to be done is recontextualizing the romance away from being a collectible and more into a reward for being kind to a character. Although, now that I've looked at a list, 26 different opportunities for sex is a bit much. I think a fair solution is removing the sex from every NPC that doesn't have a name. Of the 26 times you can have sex in Witcher 1, that would bring it down to 14, which I feel is fair, because then it gives each encounter some narrative weight, and not just as a quest reward. and it doesn't make some NPC literal sex objects with no greater purpose in the game. But enough negativity, let's close this out by talking about the things Witcher 1 Remake needs to keep: the rich narrative. While Witcher 1 can be alienating to those who haven't read the books, most people will play the game with the necessary context of the world from the Netflix show or Witcher 3. This means that the narrative doesn't have to be changed all that much, and you wouldn't believe how dense Witcher 1's story is. Chapter 2 can go in so many different directions that it feels like the outcomes are limitless. Witcher 1's tone is also my favourite in the trilogy. It's the most desperate and cruel of all the games. The brutality on display in this game can be stomach-churning, and it plays into the darker elements of the world more thoroughly than its sequels. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video about why The Witcher 3 has the hardest choices in RPGs.